Book Club! Hey everyone, Dan here from One Man Book Club. I have got something I'm so excited about for you. This is Middlegame by Seanan McGuire. Oh my gosh, I really had fun reading this book. I finished it and I was like, oh my gosh, what did I just read? What is this book? I haven't been book speechless in a long time, but this is just, it's one of those that's really hard to describe. Middlegame is just like, it's just so many things. It's science fiction, it's urban fantasy, it's speculative fiction, it's time travel. Some have said it's horror. I say not horror, it's just more like, just creepy. It's complex, like super complex, like so complex. It's detailed, it demands patience. It's math, it's language, it's magic. It's literally all of those things. If I were to sum it up, I would just say Middlegame was an absolute thrill to read, and I loved it. Okay, here it is. So Roger and Dodger are twins. They're separated at birth. One grows into a genius in language, the other into a genius in math. As children, they discover they can enter one another's minds. They live on opposite coasts of the United States, one in California, one in the northeast of the United States. But they're able to talk to each other and see through one another's minds. They get into each other's minds and then see through each other's eyes. Together, they feel whole and wonderful and perfect and connected. But when they're apart, they feel broken. Now, twins are close. But Roger and Dodger's bond is something more, something much bigger. What is it? Why are they connected in this way? Why were they separated at birth? And why does the world seem to conspire to keep them apart? Part of the joy is figuring out the whys. So no spoilers here. I'll just say Middlegame was so stinking, amazingly, absolutely well written that my brain is in gridlock trying to explain how it can be. I mean, it's simply not possible for a book this complex to be as engaging as it was, but it is. And this is the kind of story that begins with the end, then slowly trickles context over the next 500 pages until it all comes gloriously crashing together. It's exactly the kind of book that gets this book nerd's heart racing and brings a smile to my face. Now, I loved Roger and Dodger. I thought they were outstanding characters. I loved their flaws. I loved their growth. I loved them together. I turned the last page just a few days ago, and they are still running around in my brain trying to find a place to settle. I would love to read more of their adventures. I don't think there are anymore, and I don't know if there are going to be any more of their adventures. Anyway, there's something else book nerdy awesome that I want to tell you about. Have you ever heard of an author called Deborah Baker? Go look her up. She's real. She's written a series of books called The Up and Under. Book 1 of the Up and Under series is called Over the Woodward Wall, and it was published in 2020. 1 year after Middlegame was published. Middlegame was in 2019. What's the big deal, you say? Well, here's the deal. Over the Woodward Wall is a book heavily referenced in Middlegame. The book was written a year after Middlegame, but Middlegame has all of these references, and huge chunks of the story of Over the Woodward Wall are used to carry the plot of Middlegame forward. And the author, Deborah Baker, is actually a character in Middlegame. Oh, how is this possible? Well, here it is. You better be sitting down for this one if you're as much of a book nerd as me. Make sure you're sitting down. Here's how it works. Deborah Baker is an alias of Seanan McGuire. They're the same person. And Seanan McGuire wrote an entire series based on the characters and story she developed for Middlegame. It's super meta and it's super cool. Now, There are several reviews of folks who read Middlegame and didn't appreciate it because they didn't appreciate the complexity of the story or the excessive whimsy they felt that was out of place in a book for grown-ups. Now, if you've ever read Kat Valente's marvelous Fairyland stories, you'll know the type of whimsy I mean. But this bibliophile marveled at the complexity and reveled in the flitting and floating whimsical prose. In other words, Seanan McGuire speaks my language. I also saw many of the unfavorable reviews were from folks who listened to the audiobook. I didn't, so I can't comment, but based on the uniformly negative reviews I keep hearing about the audio, I would stay away from the audio on this one. Reading the words, anyway, is just too much fun. So fun, in fact, that I actually am going to go off and read another book by Seanan McGuire, Every Heart a Doorway, which might sound like a romantic love story, but it's not. Book 1 is in a series called Wayward Children. It's about a boarding school for children who found their way to magical places and then made it home but got depressed because they couldn't go back to their magical land and no one believes their story that they went there. And anyway, that sounds pretty cool to me too. So I'm going off to read that book. Content on Middlegame. There's a moderate amount of tense, creepy violence. And the back half of the book has a handful of F-bombs. There's 27 to be exact. There's no sexual content. So strictly based off of the language, I recommend adults. I recommend Middlegame to be for adults only. If you can handle the language and you can handle the complexity and the whimsy, this book is going to be for you. You're going to enjoy it. You're going to love it, I predict. Anyway, that's Middlegame by Seanan McGuire. Happy reading, everyone.